I will ask the same question to Alejandro as well, see if he has any comments. And also, Alejandro, can you maybe give the audience an example or two of successful mini-grid projects?
Yeah, of course. So I think a lot of this will build on what Layla was saying. So I'll start a bit on what are some of the best practices maybe that we've seen. Again, humble experience. I know there's a lot of experts out there. But I think a big one, and I think what Layla mentioned, is in terms of the customer willingness to pay. I think it's important when you're structuring these to understand from the start, what is that amount that the customer would be willing to pay? Because even if you have donor money coming in, what happens if that donor money dries up long term, and then if the customer willingness to pay is way lower than you expected, the project's not bankable. So keeping that in mind early on is important. And tied to that as well is ensuring that there's customer buy-in, as we talked about. So at least a bit of an upfront cost, and we know it's rural areas, people can't pay a lot, but at least for them to be involved, have a tiny bit of skin in the game is important for the long-term success of these programs. Another one that I think is important is, again, considering where you are setting up these mini-grids. So is it you're doing the assessment, and is it worth it to actually create a mini-grid, or is it more of a solar home system, right? And so what's the concentration of people that are in the area that you can set up some of these projects, and then making that determination in terms of the bankability of it longer term. And when doing that as well, thinking, are there any anchor businesses that can help guide that mini-grid, right? Is there a store, is there a business that can be one of the main people consuming from the mini-grid and help draw people in? And so you mentioned examples. I mean, we've seen some of these examples in a place like Nigeria, where we've done work where there's a lot of different mini-grids that take this form of approaches. When they were creating them, they took this sort of approach in terms of where they actually set them up. One last thing that I think was interesting, and also when talking to some of the people at this conference that has come up, is how do you also make sure that the people who are paying the mini-grids, the end users, have enough financing to actually pay for it, right? So someone talked about a bit creating like the ecosystem for it, but it's the idea of how do you ensure that the energy that you provide to an end user allows them to then do an activity that lets them then get the money to pay you, for example, right? So if they're able to have a sewing machine, and then they can make clothes, sell those clothes, and pay you back because of it, that's where you sort of create the circular economy. So what are things that we can do on top of just the mini-grids to ensure that people are able to do this? Some things like this could be like appliance financing. So giving financing for certain appliances that allows them to also then be able to do these economic activities.
المؤتمر الوطني الأول للطاقة نحو وطن متعاف بطاقة مستدامة.